Hello, it's Karen, and I'm at the Cool Tools studio today to share with you guys a project that's going to introduce you to working with undyed tooling leather. I'm going to be dyeing this leather with alcohol inks before combining it with Cyprus copper clay accents to make these really lightweight, fun, colorful earrings. I'm going to get started on this project with the copper clay working section. Here's what we're going to need for that portion of the project. I've got a clay hydrator, some cool slip, and I like to use gloves in a bottle when I'm working with Cyprus copper clay. I have an ultra clay pick, a work surface, some clay thickness rolling frames, and I'm going to be using the diamond shaped template. I have simple leaves embossed for my texture, and I'm going to be using Cyprus copper clay. I also have a clay roller, and then some sanding pads, and some sanding sticks. That's what we're going to need. Let's get started. I'm choosing to work with Cyprus copper clay for this project because I love the way that the warmth of the copper complements the leather. And since we're making earrings, we're going to try to keep things light. So I'm going to start by rolling my clay to 4 cards thick, and I'm going to roll down to 2 cards when I'm adding my texture. Got to start off with some cool slip. That's plenty for my surface and my roller. All right. I'm working with this simple leaves embossed texture tile, and I really love it. There's lots of different patterns that you can choose from among the tile. And I'm going to start off with some cool slip. And I like that spot right there. There's some small details. I'm going to be rolling down to 2. And that'll keep my earrings nice and light and give me a nice deep texture. All right, that looks great. So I'm using the diamond shape for these earrings, and I'm going to be cutting out this size. And again, there's lots of different compositions, but I liked those little intricate details with the smaller leaves. I'm going to center that. I'm just going to use my ultra clay pick to pick out the design. Remove the excess, put it in my hydrator to keep it nice and moist. So since I'm making earrings, I'm going to make another one of these, and then I'm going to allow it to dry before I sand it and clean it up. My piece is dry, and I'm going to start refining the edges with these sanding sticks. So you might have noticed that I didn't punch a hole to hang my earring from yet, and I'm going to wait to do that until after it's fired because I'm going to use the same tool to punch my leather. That way the holes are the same size and they'll line up perfectly. So my shape's looking good. I'm going to move on to the fine sanding stick. And then I like to use the sponges to kind of round the edge. And I'm going to work my way to the finer sanding sponges. I've cleaned up my edges and my shape's looking good. So now I'm going to fire it in carbon following the instructions that were included with my Cyprus copper clay. Before we dive right in, let's take a look at what we're going to need for the leather working portion of this project. Since I'm just introducing you to leather, I'm going to be showing you how to work with some tools that you might have already acquired as a jewelry maker. Here's what you're going to need. You're going to need some undyed tooling leather, and Cool Tools sells 2 different thicknesses. I'm going to be working with the thicker. I kind of like the body that it has, but we also sell a little thinner if you'd like that better. I also have a set of hole punching pliers. I'm going to be using 1.5 millimeter. I have some chain nose pliers, a self-healing work surface, a pencil, a ruler, a scalpel, and then I'm going to be using these ear wires that have these nice copper accents to complement my copper clay. using the alcohol inks on top of a tile, and then I have some super glue and some rubber gloves. Let's get started. So I have my copper accent pieces and I fired them and patinaed them using our patina gel. And I'm going to use these as a guide to draw the lines that I'm going to follow when I'm cutting my leather. And I've just got a pencil and I'm going to mark very lightly so I don't scratch the surface, because you are able to erase off of this leather with no issues. I'm just drawing nice light lines. And then I'm going to start by drawing a center line from the 2 points of the diamond at the top and the bottom, and I'm going to continue that down. And then I'm going to decide how long I want the overall length of my tassel to be. And I'm going to do 1.5 inches. So I'm going to mark on that center line, 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to mark from these other 2 corners 1.5 inches down as well. And I kind of stretch it out to be a little bit longer. All right. And then at this point, I'm going to line up my ruler with this edge of the diamond and drag it down until it intersects with my center point and then the length that I marked over here. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side, and that will just kind of give the end of my tassel symmetry to the diamond that I had up there. All right, and then I'm going to go back up to the corner of my diamond and draw a line connecting that corner down to this intersection. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So again, I'm drawing so faintly, that way I'm not scratching the surface of my leather. All right, now that I've got the lines that I'm going to follow to cut, I'm going to be using a scalpel. You'll want to have a nice fresh blade, and it might take 2 passes to cut all the way through. So I usually do 1 cut to just kind of generally follow. I'm not cutting all the way through, but just finding that line and doing the first pass of my cut. This is my second pass through, and I should be mostly through it by now. Oh, gotta come back to that corner. All right, and there's my shape. I'm gonna wait to cut the individual tassels until after I've dyed the piece. Because I'm doing kind of a gradient of color, it's easier to get a smooth transition when the surface is even. So let's move on to dyeing this leather. Before we dive right in on dyeing our leather, I wanted to share with you guys some samples that I made. I used the alcohol inks on these just simple leather forms to get a sense of how the colors read. And they're really brilliant and vibrant, and I had such a hard time picking just a few colors, but I'm going to choose to work with aqua and slate in this project. So before I dye my piece, I'm just going to show you guys how nicely pencil erases off of this leather surface. Can never tell you drew on it. I'm going to be dyeing my leather on top of a ceramic tile, and I like working on top of these because they're a non-absorbent surface and you can clean them in between colors with a rag with some rubbing alcohol on it. I'm going to be wearing gloves because the dyes will definitely stain your hands, And I'm actually going to use my fingers to kind of blend the colors. So since I'm doing a gradient, I'm going to start with my lighter color, which is aqua. And this leather really absorbs quite a bit, so be prepared to be generous. And I'm just going to apply directly onto my piece. Make sure I evenly distribute it. And you can already see how quickly it's drying and absorbing into my piece. So I'm going to add some more. And I'm going to flip it over and apply some dye to the back as well. And I'm going to have my piece pretty well saturated before I add the dark. If my piece was dry when I added the darker color, it would soak right in and I wouldn't really have the time to blend it to a nice gradient. So I want my piece to kind of have some dye sitting on the surface of the lighter color before I add the darker color. All right. So I'm going to add some more of the light color. And then I'm going to come in with my darker color at the bottom. And just a couple drops. And see how it's kind of sitting on top of the other dye color? That gives me a chance to really take my time in blending it up. Add a little bit more. Great. I think that looks nice, so I'm going to allow it to dry. As it dries, it's going to lighten some, and if you want a little more vibrancy, you can repeat this process, but again, begin with the light before you add the darker color. Alcohol ink dries really quickly, but I used quite a bit on these pieces and really saturated my leather, so it's going to take a little bit to dry. I'm going to give it about an hour or so before I cut my tassels. It should feel dry to the touch, and then you know you're ready to go. My leather is completely dry, and none of the ink's coming off of my hands, so I know I'm ready to cut. But before I started cutting my tassels, I wanted to show you guys this. If you're not interested in adding tassels, but still want to add some interest to your piece, since this is tooling leather, you can use any of our metal punches on this leather. So I'm going to be using my pencil again to draw some lines to guide my cuts for my tassel. And I'm starting off with that center line again. And again, you'll be able to erase these lines after you've done cutting. So next, I'm going to draw a line from these two bottom points. Alright, so next I'm going to decide how wide I want my tassels to be. And I went with around 3 millimeters. So I'm going to center 3 millimeters from the center line on this intersection point. I'm going to put around 1.5 centered on that center line. And then I'm going to mark at the 0 and the 3. And then I'm going to measure 3 millimeters over until I get to that outside edge, and then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So I have my 3 millimeter increments marked, and now I'm going to be drawing a line from that mark up through the top of my piece. And then when you go to cut, you can either at this point erase your center line, or you can just remember that that was a guide and not an actual line to cut on. So I have those lines, and then I'm going to bring my copper piece in and place it on top to generally kind of realize that I need to cut up to at least this point. But then I also know that I don't want to cut all the way through because then there'll be nothing to hold my piece together. So I'm just going to kind of make a line here to remind me that all my cuts should stop before that line. So I've got my scalpel again. And I'm just going to cut following those lines. Like I said, it'll probably take you 2 passes or so. And then as you're cutting, depending on how much you saturated your piece, the inside might have a lighter tint to it. I like that, it adds some contrast. If you don't, when you're done cutting this piece, you can add the lighter colored dye back over the whole piece to add some pigment to those edges. I'll go ahead and cut the rest of these lines and we'll catch up when my tassel is finished. So I have my tassel cut and I erased my pencil lines. You can't even tell they were there. And I'm going to start off by cutting a hole into my copper. And I'm going to be using these hole punching pliers. Just like that. And then I'm going to place this piece on top of my tassel and mark on my leather where the hole should be. And we saw other hole punches that were designed specifically for leather, but all of them were a little bit large for this project. I wouldn't recommend consistently using these pliers on leather unless you're going to buy a pair specifically for that purpose. Line it up with my mark, and it punches the leather super cleanly as well. Like I said, eventually it might dull your cutting edge. All right, so then I'm going to line up these 2 holes, and I'm going to put them on my ear wire. And I've got some chain nose pliers that I'm going to use to open them. And I really love these ear wires because they've got the copper accent that goes really well with the Cyprus copper clay, but only silver will be touching the sensitive skin of your ear. I'm going to pop it through both pieces at once. And I'm going to close the little jump ring on the back here. And now once these pieces are together, you can either leave it like that if you kind of like the swing, or you can add just a dab of super glue to the back of the copper piece. And I'm going to put it on the copper piece because that'll give me a little more room to adjust, whereas it will absorb really quickly to the leather and dry very quickly there too. So just a dot. Then I'm going to flip it over and kind of line that up. And I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure while it dries. Once the glue is set, your earrings are done. Here's the finished pair, and here are some other variations of this project that I did as well. I had a lot of fun with the alcohol inks and couldn't stop at just one. If you're not interested in the tassel, you can make just a simple form and hang it from the Cyprus copper clay as a dangle earring. I hope you've enjoyed this introductory leather and Cyprus copper clay earring project and give experimenting with alcohol inks on leather a try. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think you will too. Thanks so much for watching.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.